What if the story of human civilization isn't the first chapter, but just the latest? We like to think of ourselves as unique masters of technology, architects of progress, the first species to bend the Earth to our will. But the truth is, Earth is 4.5 billion years old, while humans have been around for barely 300,000 years. Modern civilization, everything we call advanced, only stretches back a few thousand. On the clock of deep time, that's less than a flicker. Which leaves us with a haunting question: what filled the endless ages before us? Could other civilizations have risen, flourished, and fallen long before we ever walked this planet? Their stories swallowed by the silence of time. The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to dismiss the possibility. Around the world, myths from cultures, oceans apart, tell eerily similar tales of gods descending from the sky, floods that wiped out entire worlds, and advanced beings who came before. Beneath the ocean, divers stumble across strange ruins like Yonaguni or Dwarka, their origins shrouded in mystery. And in the rocks themselves, scientists find anomalies, chemical signatures, unusual isotopes, unexplained layers that resemble the footprints of industry. Are these just quirks of nature, or fragments of civilizations erased so thoroughly that only faint whispers remain? Time is not kind to memory. Cities crumble, oceans rise, mountains grind themselves into dust. If humanity vanished tomorrow, in 1,000,000 years almost nothing of us would remain, which means, if others came before us, their traces may already be gone, buried under miles of rock, dissolved into the sea, recycled into the planet itself. But sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. Sometimes it leaves behind just enough to make us wonder. And when you piece together those anomalies, myths and mysteries, a chilling pattern emerges. One that suggests we may not be the first to rise, and we may not be the last to fall. When you zoom out far enough to see Earth's full story, everything we know about human history begins to look impossibly small. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old, a span of time so vast it is almost incomprehensible. To give it perspective, if Earth's history were compressed into a single 24-hour day, humans wouldn't appear until less than a second before midnight. Dinosaurs would have roamed the Earth only minutes earlier, and the entire span of recorded history, the pyramids, the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, the digital age, would all unfold in the blink of an eye. We see ourselves as central to the planet's story, but in reality, we are barely a footnote scribbled in the margins of a colossal book that stretches billions of years deep. That realization alone is enough to spark unsettling questions. If humanity occupies such a tiny sliver of Earth's time, what else might have filled the vast ages before us? To understand the scale, consider how quickly things can vanish, even in human history. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen in the span of just a few centuries, leaving behind little more than ruins and myth. The Sumerians, often called the first great civilization, thrived around 6,000 years ago, but much of their world is now lost, with only fragments of clay tablets to remind us of their existence. The Indus Valley civilization built sprawling cities with advanced plumbing and trade networks, yet today most of what they were remains a mystery, buried under layers of earth. Even mighty Rome, whose empire spanned continents, crumbled into fragments, its grandeur reduced to scattered stones and broken roads. If this much can vanish in just a few thousand years, imagine what happens across millions, or even hundreds of millions. Earth itself is an eraser, constantly rewriting its own surface. Tectonic plates shift, pushing mountains into the sky and dragging entire continents into the molten depths. Oceans rise to swallow coastlines, then recede, leaving behind nothing but layers of sediment. Glaciers carve valleys, deserts bury cities, and forests overrun stone. Given enough time, every trace of human civilization, skyscrapers, satellites, even our digital records will disappear. Within just a few centuries of abandonment, vegetation would reclaim our cities. In 1,000 years, skyscrapers would be rubble. In 10,000, very little of our world would remain recognizable. Within 1,000,000 years, almost nothing would survive on the surface. If we can vanish so easily, why assume that others before us didn't? This is the unsettling beauty of Earth's clock versus human time. We measure history in decades and centuries, but the planet measures it in millions and billions of years. We think of ancient Egypt, 5,000 years ago, as unimaginably distant, Yet compared to the age of the Earth that was yesterday, the dinosaurs vanished 65 million years ago, a gulf of time so enormous that, if another advanced species had existed then, almost nothing of them would remain today. Their skyscrapers would be mountains of dust, their satellites long since burned up in the sky, their machines corroded into nothing. Unless we knew exactly what to look for, we might dismiss their traces as natural quirks, geological oddities, or unexplained anomalies. This is why the question of forgotten civilizations cannot be brushed aside as fantasy. The vastness of Earth's timeline allows for countless rises and falls, cycles of creation and erasures, and the silence we see in the fossil record or in archaeology may not be proof that no one came before, but simply the inevitable result of time's relentless erosion. Deep time doesn't preserve stories, it devours them. If intelligence rose and fell long before us, we should not expect clear ruins or intact artifacts to survive. Instead, we should expect whispers, odd signatures in rocks, myths that echo too loudly across cultures, and mysterious artifacts that do not quite fit the story we tell ourselves. And here is where the human ego blinds us. We look at the clock of Earth and assume we must be special, that intelligence like ours is a rare accident. But evolution has produced complex life multiple times. Dinosaurs ruled for over 150 million years, far longer than humans have existed. Mammals, birds, fish and insects have all demonstrated remarkable adaptability, intelligence and resilience. Intelligence is not a singular phenomenon, it is a potential, one that can emerge again and again, given enough time. If evolution produced us, why not others? And if others rose before us, how much time did they have to build, to flourish, to create worlds now lost in the depths of prehistory? One way to visualize it is to imagine humanity's existence as a single grain of sand on an endless beach. We are one point in a vast continuum, and the beach stretches so far in both directions that we can never see its ends. Standing on our grain, we see only the present and the fragments of the past nearest to us. But further down that beach, beyond our sight, there could be countless other grains representing civilizations long erased, each one as real as ours, each one swallowed by the waves of time. The question is not whether there was room for them. There is more than enough room. The question is whether we are willing to consider the possibility that we are not the first nor the last to play this role. Earth's clock humbles us. It reminds us that we are temporary, fragile, and fleeting. It shows us that time is not our ally. It is the great equalizer, erasing all who come before. And most of all, it suggests that silence is not proof of emptiness. Just because we have not yet found undeniable evidence of earlier civilizations does not mean they never existed. It may simply mean that we are looking with the wrong eyes, or that the traces we seek have long since dissolved into the soil and stone beneath our feet. When you measure human history against Earth's clock, the unsettling truth emerges. There was time enough for countless rises and falls before us, and there will be time enough for countless more after we are gone. The only question is whether we are brave enough to admit it, and whether we are wise enough to learn from the silence that surrounds us. One of the greatest obstacles in searching for civilizations that may have existed before us is not just the vastness of time, but the sheer fragility of evidence itself. We tend to assume that if something grand and advanced once stood upon this earth, we would still be able to see it. We picture monuments of stone, cities of steel, or machines of incredible sophistication leaving behind undeniable proof. But this assumption fails to recognize how swiftly and mercilessly nature dismantles what humans build. Nothing is permanent, not even the most durable monuments of our age. Time is not passive, it is an active destroyer, and it erases with startling efficiency. To see how fragile evidence is, you don't need to look millions of years into the past. You only need to look at what happens when humanity abandons its creations. Consider the ruins of Pripyat, the city abandoned after the Chernobyl disaster. In less than 4 decades, nature has reclaimed entire neighborhoods. Trees burst through asphalt, buildings collapse from rot and rust, and wildlife flourishes where once there were busy streets. Or take Detroit, where economic collapse left blocks of the city abandoned. Within just a few decades, houses and factories became shells, windows shattered, roofs caved in, and plants overtook the remains. If this happens in mere decades, what happens in centuries, millennia, or millions of years? Studies have shown that if humanity vanished tomorrow, within 100 years, that most buildings would be rubble, their steel frames corroded and concrete fractured. Within 10,000 years, almost all visible traces of human civilization would vanish, save for a few stone structures and some scattered artifacts. Within a million years, even those would be buried, crushed, or eroded beyond recognition. The vast bulk of our story would be gone, as if it had never existed. And yet we assume that if others came before us, their evidence should be obvious. The truth is, the Earth does not preserve, it recycles. Even stone, which we think of as eternal, is not safe from time. Wind erodes cliffs, rain dissolves rock, glaciers grind mountains to dust. The pyramids of Egypt, which have stood for 5,000 years, are already weathered, their outer casing stones long gone. Given another 100,000 years, they may be nothing but eroded mounds. Given a million, they may vanish entirely. If humanity disappeared today, future archaeologists might find almost nothing of our greatest monuments. What chance, then, would a civilization millions of years older than us have of leaving recognizable traces? The ocean, too, is a thief of memory. Coastlines shift constantly, and rising seas drown cities. Modern science has shown that during the last ice age, sea levels were over 300 feet lower than they are today. Entire landmasses that once connected continents are now submerged. If civilizations had built along those coastlines, their ruins would now be hidden beneath the waves. Divers today discover strange stone structures like Yonaguni off Japan, Dwarka off India, or Bimini Road in the Bahamas, sparking debates about whether they are natural formations or remnants of forgotten societies. Even if they were built by advanced civilizations, water and tectonic activity would eventually erase most evidence, grinding it into sand. The ocean floor is not a static archive, it is a place of constant renewal and destruction. Volcanic activity is another eraser of history. Lava buries towns in hours, as it did in Pompeii, but over time, those buried cities themselves crumble and fuse into stone. Earthquakes topple buildings, burying them beneath rubble that is later covered by soil and forests. Even entire continents are not permanent. The theory of plate tectonics shows that the Earth's crust is constantly moving, recycling itself. Ocean floors are dragged into the mantle and melted, while new crust emerges elsewhere. A city built 200 million years ago on what was then a continent might now lie thousands of miles away, buried beneath the ocean floor, utterly erased from the surface. This is why the geological record is so difficult to interpret. Evidence does not survive easily. Fossils form only under rare conditions, and even then, they represent a fraction of all the life that ever existed. Entire species may have come and gone without leaving a single identifiable fossil behind. The same is true of civilizations, unless their remains were preserved under exceptional circumstances, frozen, buried, or fossilized. The Earth would erase them completely. And even if something survived, how would we recognize it? A corroded fragment of advanced technology might appear as nothing more than an unusual mineral deposit. A city ground into rubble by glaciers might look like a random scattering of rock. Without context, even real artifacts can vanish into the background noise of geology. The Antikythera mechanism proves just how fragile knowledge can be. This ancient Greek device, often called the world's first computer, was discovered in a shipwreck over 2,000 years old. For centuries, no one knew such technology had ever existed, and if the mechanism had not been preserved underwater, we might still believe that gear-based computing was a modern invention. Multiply that fragility by millions of years, and you begin to see how entire civilizations could vanish without leaving recognizable proof. The few anomalies we do find may not be outliers at all. They may be the last whispers of stories erased by time. What makes the fragility of evidence even more troubling is the role of human perception. We often dismiss anomalies that don't fit our accepted timeline. Out-of-place artifacts, objects that appear to be too advanced for their supposed age, are frequently labeled hoaxes, misidentifications, or accidents. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes it may be that we simply cannot accept the implication. If a tool or fragment of technology is found in a geological layer, millions of years old, our instinct is to deny its possibility rather than question the timeline. In this way, even when fragments of evidence do survive, they may be ignored, misclassified, or forgotten. The fragility of evidence teaches us a sobering truth. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that we have not found clear, undeniable proof of earlier civilizations does not mean they never existed. It may only mean that time has done its work, erasing all but the faintest hints. and we have not yet learned to recognize those hints for what they are. Our arrogance blinds us into thinking that we are the first and only, but the silence of the past may be an illusion created by time's relentless destruction. And perhaps the most chilling part is that this fragility applies to us as well. If we vanish tomorrow, how long would our memory survive? 100,000 years from now, would anyone know we had ever existed? 1,000,000 years from now, would our cities, our technology, our culture be anything more than dust and isotopes in the rock? The same forces that erase others will erase us. We assume our story will endure, but the fragility of evidence suggests otherwise. Time does not care what we build. It does not preserve monuments or honor legacies. It recycles everything, and that means that if civilizations did exist before us, we should not expect to see them clearly. We should expect faint echoes at best. The real mystery is not why there is so little evidence. It is why there is any evidence at all. If history leaves behind ruins and bones, geology leaves behind whispers. The rocks beneath our feet are the oldest archives on the planet, and yet they do not tell their story clearly. They compress, erode, fracture, and layer themselves into puzzles that take generations to decode. But hidden in those layers are anomalies, strange signatures, unusual patterns, and chemical fingerprints that do not fit neatly into the story we've been taught. Some of these anomalies can be explained by natural processes, but others remain stubbornly mysterious, as if hinting at something more, as if fragments of an erased chapter are buried, not in libraries or ruins, but in the stone itself. These geological whispers may be the only traces of civilizations older than memory. One of the most striking examples is the Oklo natural reactor in Gabon, Africa. Discovered in the 1970s, it appeared at first to be an ordinary uranium deposit. Scientists realized that something extraordinary had happened there 2 billion years ago. A nuclear chain reaction. For centuries, fission had been occurring naturally in the deposit, leaving behind isotopic signatures identical to those produced in modern reactors. Mainstream science explains this as a rare but natural phenomenon, and perhaps it is. Yet the fact that uranium in Oklo mimics the byproducts of technology raises unsettling questions. If such isotopic anomalies could be explained as natural, how would we ever distinguish between the traces of a forgotten reactor built by intelligent beings and a natural event? The stone itself may not care who wrote its signature. Another whisper comes in the form of sudden spikes in carbon dioxide and methane found in ancient geological layers. These spikes resemble the chemical fingerprints our own civilization is currently leaving behind through industry and fossil fuel burning. When scientists examine past epochs, such as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum around 55 million years ago, they find evidence of abrupt warming and greenhouse gas surges. The conventional explanation is volcanic activity or methane release from the seafloor. Yet when viewed through the lens of the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment about detecting past industrial civilizations, these same anomalies could look like the footprint of industry long before humanity ever existed. The line between natural catastrophe and artificial impact is perilously thin. Then there are the mysterious spheres found in Klerksdorp, South Africa. These metallic objects, some with perfectly straight grooves around their circumference, were discovered in rock layers estimated to be billions of years old. Mainstream explanations classify them as natural concretions formed by geological processes, but their precision has fueled speculation. Are they the result of natural mineral growth, or are they artifacts of something else? If even a few are artificial, they would rewrite everything we believe about history. And if they are natural, they remind us that the Earth itself can create objects so precise that we would struggle to tell them apart from tools or manufactured items. Either way, they emphasize the problem. Geology whispers, but it never shouts. Another anomaly lies in the layers of ancient mass extinctions. Time and again, the fossil record reveals sudden die-offs that reset the course of life. The most famous is the event that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, marked by a thin layer of iridium, an element rare on Earth but common in asteroids. Scientists interpret this as the signature of an impact, and likely it is. Yet, what if some of these layers also hide other causes? Chemical signatures of pollution, traces of radiation, evidence of destruction not from the sky but from the ground, from civilizations that burn themselves out. If humanity were to vanish tomorrow, our own geological legacy would look much the same. A thin layer of plastics, unusual isotopes from nuclear testing, and a sudden extinction wave. A future species might assume an asteroid struck, never suspecting that it was us. Could we be making the same mistake when we look at the past? The rocks also whisper through anomalies in fossilization. For instance, there are reported cases of metallic objects embedded in coal seams or stone layers, millions of years old, hammers, nails, or strange metallic shapes. Mainstream science often dismisses these as misinterpretations, hoaxes, or intrusions from later periods, and many surely are. But the very existence of such reports forces us to ask a deeper question. How would we recognize the tools of a civilization that lived millions of years ago, once they had been crushed, mineralized, and transformed by geological processes? A corroded machine part, after eons, might be indistinguishable from a natural mineral vein. A fragment of a circuit might appear as nothing more than an unusual crystal. The distinction between artifact and geology blurs the deeper you dig into time. Even chemical layers hold secrets. Traces of synthetic-looking compounds have occasionally been found where none should exist, such as the presence of anomalous isotopes of plutonium in ancient soils. Mainstream science explains these anomalies as rare natural processes, but they serve as reminders that geology is not simple. If intelligent beings once mined, burned, or altered their environment millions of years ago, the remnants might not look like skyscrapers or machines. They might look like chemical oddities, layers of unusual composition, or spikes of isotopes scattered in stone. The more we look, the more we see patterns that feel eerily familiar. And then there are the great silences, periods in the fossil record where life seems to vanish or reset. The Cambrian explosion around 540 million years ago is often celebrated as the sudden emergence of complex life. But what if it was also the aftermath of a previous collapse? What if intelligence had risen before, only to vanish so completely that it left no trace but a reset of life itself? Geological whispers do not answer these questions. They only hint. They leave us with silence broken by faint, puzzling sounds that may be coincidence, or they may be echoes of forgotten civilization. The challenge is that science demands proof, but geology rarely gives it. Stones do not preserve civilizations neatly. They erase, recycle, and compress. A skyscraper left for millions of years would become sediment. A satellite would burn up. A power plant would corrode into the soil. The traces left behind would not look like ruins. They would look like anomalies, strange isotopes, odd chemical layers, unusual mineral deposits. And this is exactly what we find in Earth's record, scattered here and there, puzzling but never definitive. The rocks whisper but they never shout. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. If there were civilizations before us, we would not find their ruins standing tall. We would not find their machines neatly preserved. We would find only whispers, chemical signatures, geological oddities, patterns in stone that suggest but never confirm. And when we look closely, that is exactly what we see. The Earth is not silent. It murmurs with anomalies, subtle hints that the story we tell ourselves may be incomplete. The real question is not whether the evidence exists. It is whether we are willing to listen to whispers when we demand shouts. If geology whispers through stone, myths whisper through memory. Stories are humanity's oldest archives, carried not in stone tablets or digital servers, but in the spoken word, passed from one generation to the next, long before writing was invented. What makes myths so powerful is their persistence. Civilizations rise and fall, languages evolve and vanish, but stories endure, reshaped and retold across continents and centuries. And what's most striking is that when you look closely at the myths of cultures separated by oceans, time, and language, you begin to see eerie patterns. They tell the same kinds of stories: floods that destroy entire worlds, gods who descend from the skies, cycles of creation and destruction. For centuries, these were dismissed as superstition or coincidence. But what if they're not just fantasy? What if myths are the distorted memories of real events? Echoes of forgotten civilizations that existed long before recorded history. Take, for example, the flood myths. Nearly every culture on Earth has some version of a great flood that wiped out humanity. The Mesopotamian story of Utnapishtim, preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh, describes gods sending a deluge to cleanse the world, with one man chosen to build a vessel and save life. Thousands of miles away, the Bible recounts the story of Noah, which mirrors the same structure. In India, Hindu mythology tells of Manu, warned by a fish to build a boat before floodwaters destroyed humanity. Native American tribes Polynesian islanders, and African cultures all preserve their own versions of this same story. Is it coincidence that so many cultures, separated by geography and time, remember the world being drowned, or is it a memory of a real cataclysm that reshaped human history? Perhaps the rising seas at the end of the last ice age, or even a disaster that struck a civilization we no longer remember. The same is true of myths about gods descending from the skies. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were powerful beings who came down from the heavens and gave knowledge to humanity. In Greek mythology, the Olympian gods dwelled above and intervened in human affairs, often teaching or punishing mortals. In the stories of the Dogon people of Africa, beings from the star Sirius came to Earth to share wisdom. Native American legends speak of star people, and Polynesian myths describe gods who sailed through the skies. Across cultures, across continents, the story repeats. Knowledge came from above, delivered by beings remembered as divine. Were these simply archetypal stories humans invented to explain the unknown? Or are they distorted memories of contact with advanced civilizations, whether human or something else, that existed long before? There are also myths of lost lands and sunken kingdoms. The most famous is Atlantis, described by Plato as an advanced society that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night of disaster. Many dismiss it as allegory, a story meant to illustrate moral lessons, but other cultures tell eerily similar tales. In India, there is the legend of Dwarka, a city of gold said to have been swallowed by the sea. In Tamil traditions, Kumari Kandam is remembered as a vast land lost beneath the Indian Ocean. The Maya and Aztecs spoke of Aztlan, a homeland destroyed by floods. Polynesian cultures tell of lands drowned by the rising ocean, their people forced to migrate to smaller islands. These stories, scattered across the globe, all describe the same kind of catastrophe: advanced lands swallowed by the sea, leaving survivors to carry the memory forward. When myths align this closely, is it still coincidence? Or are they fragmented accounts of real civilizations, destroyed by rising waters thousands, even tens of thousands of years ago? And then there are the stories of cycles, worlds destroyed and reborn over and over. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of yugas, each age rising, decaying, and collapsing, only for the process to begin again. The Hopi people of North America tell of multiple worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and flood, with humanity now living in the fourth world. The Maya spoke of previous suns, each world age destroyed by catastrophe before a new one rose. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok tells of gods and mortals perishing in fire and flood, followed by renewal. The consistency of these stories is striking. They suggest that humanity has long believed, not in a single creation, but in cycles of destruction and rebirth. Could it be that these myths are not metaphor, but cultural memory of civilizations that rose, fell, and were forgotten, leaving only their demise etched into story? What makes myths compelling is their persistence across distance and time. Cultures with no contact somehow preserve the same theme, and while skeptics argue that floods, fire, and sky gods are simply universal human archetypes, another explanation is possible: that these stories are memories of real events, preserved in the only way they could be, through oral tradition. Archaeology shows that oral traditions can last tens of thousands of years. Aboriginal Australian stories, for example, describe coastlines and islands that were swallowed by the sea at the end of the last ice age. Science has confirmed that these events happened over 7,000 years ago, yet the memory survived intact through myth. If stories can endure for millennia, is it so unthinkable that tales of floods, sky beings, and lost lands might also be fragments of older, forgotten events? Even when stripped of literal meaning, myths still point towards something deeper. A flood story may not mean a literal global flood, but it may preserve the memory of rising seas that forced entire cultures to relocate. Stories of gods descending from the sky may not mean extraterrestrials, but they may reflect the awe inspired by contact with another advanced human group, one so technologically superior that they seem divine. Myths of cycles may not describe cosmic ages, but they may reflect the lived experience of collapse and rebirth, civilizations rising and falling so completely that survivors thought the world itself had ended. In every case, myths carry kernels of truth, embedded in symbolism and allegory. Dismissing them as superstition risks discarding the only surviving records of events that archaeology cannot recover. The challenge lies in separating memory from metaphor. Myths evolve as they're told, details shift, and symbols take on new meanings. Yet beneath the variations, the core themes remain consistent. Floods, sky beings, lost lands, cycles of destruction. These are not isolated stories, but recurring motifs, and the fact that they appear everywhere suggests they may be more than coincidence. If geology whispers through stone, then myths whisper through story. Both are incomplete, fragmented and ambiguous, but both may be pointing toward the same unsettling truth, that civilizations before ours rose and fell, leaving only faint echoes behind. And perhaps that is why myths matter so much in this search. They are not proof, but they are clues. They remind us that memory can outlast monuments, that stories can survive catastrophes even when cities do not. If entire civilizations were erased by time, their last legacy may be the myths carried by their survivors, distorted by retelling but still echoing the truth. We may never find their ruins, but their voices may still speak to us through the stories we dismiss as fantasy. To listen to myths is to listen to memory itself, and memory may be the only evidence that time cannot fully erase. If myths speak of lost lands, then the oceans hold the silence that might confirm them. The sea covers over 70% of the earth, and yet we have explored only a fraction of it. Beneath those waters could lie entire chapters of history erased from memory and buried under shifting currents. What makes this idea so compelling is not just the myth of Atlantis or the legends of drowned kingdoms, but the very real discoveries that hint at civilizations swallowed by the sea. All across the world, divers and researchers have stumbled upon structures that challenge our understanding of the past. Some can be explained as natural formations, others as remnants of known ancient cultures, but a few remain tantalizingly mysterious, as if daring us to consider the possibility that advanced societies existed long before we were ready to admit it. One of the most debated discoveries lies off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument. Found in 1986, it consists of massive stone terraces, steps, and platforms that resemble a sunken city. Some experts argue it's a natural formation shaped by currents and erosion, but others see the hallmarks of human design: straight edges, right angles, and even what looks like a staircase leading up. If Yonaguni were confirmed as artificial, it would mean that someone built a monumental stone structure thousands of years earlier than conventional history allows, possibly during a time when sea levels were far lower and Yonaguni was part of dry land. That would place its construction at least 10,000 years ago, coinciding eerily with the end of the last ice age and the flood myths preserved across cultures. India offers another clue in the city of Dwarka, once thought to be purely legendary. Ancient texts like the Mahabharata describe Dwarka as a glittering city built by the god Krishna, complete with palaces of gold and silver. For centuries it was dismissed as myth, but in 2001, marine archaeologists exploring the Gulf of Hambat discovered ruins beneath the waves, stone walls, roads, and artifacts dating back more than 9,000 years. If these findings are genuine, they predate the earliest known cities by several millennia. Mainstream explanations suggest that these may have been early settlements later submerged by rising seas, but the scale and sophistication described in ancient texts raise the possibility that Dwarka was more than just a fishing village. It may have been a center of civilization erased by water and remembered only as myth. Farther west, in the Bahamas, lies the enigma of the Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968, it consists of massive rectangular stones laid out in a straight path beneath shallow waters. Skeptics argue it's a natural formation of beach rock fractured by tidal forces. Believers see it as the remnants of a paved road, perhaps part of a larger complex now buried by the sea. The discovery was made just a few years after psychic Edgar Cayce predicted that evidence of Atlantis would emerge near Bimini, which has fueled speculation ever since. Whether coincidence or not, the Bimini Road remains an unresolved puzzle, one that keeps the possibility of forgotten civilizations alive in the public imagination. The Mediterranean is also rich with hints of drowned worlds. Off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, divers have discovered vast ruins that once belonged to the ancient city of Heraclean, now submerged. Temples, statues, and columns lie preserved beneath the waves, reminders that even great cities can vanish when the sea decides to claim them. While Heraclean is firmly within the timeline of recorded history, its rediscovery shows how easily entire metropolises can be lost and forgotten, only to be rediscovered thousands of years later. If this can happen to a city known from historical texts, How many cities with no written record have been erased entirely? In Malta, beneath the island's waters, lie stone structures that appear similar to the island's megalithic temples. Malta itself hosts some of the oldest freestanding stone structures in the world, dating back more than 5. If submerged counterparts exist, they could point to even older phases of construction during times when sea levels were lower. Such discoveries raise the possibility that human societies were building monumental structures long before we currently recognize. Even in places like Cuba, whispers of lost cities have emerged. In 2001, researchers using sonar off Cuba's western coast detected what appeared to be massive stone formations nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. Some described them as pyramid-like structures or roads. The depth at which they lie suggests they would have been built more than 50,000 years ago, long before conventional history acknowledges advanced civilizations. The findings remain controversial and largely unverified, but they add to the growing list of anomalies that suggest the ocean floor may be hiding far more than we imagine. The theme that connects all of these discoveries is the rising sea. At the end of the last ice age, between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago, sea levels rose more than 300 feet as glaciers melted. Vast coastal areas that once housed human settlements were swallowed, leaving only stories behind. Considering that most human populations have historically lived near coastlines for access to food and trade, it is inevitable that countless prehistoric settlements now lie beneath the sea, drowned and forgotten. The ocean is not just a barrier, it is a graveyard for civilizations, keeping their secrets locked away under pressure, currents and sediment. Skeptics argue that these sites, Yonaguni, Bimini, Dwarka and others, are either natural formations or the remnants of known ancient cultures, nothing more. And in some cases they are right. The Earth can mimic architecture through natural processes, creating shapes that appear designed but are not. But skeptics face their own problem: the sheer number of such anomalies scattered across the globe. When myths, legends and real discoveries begin to align, the possibility that all are mere coincidence becomes harder to defend. The ocean is too vast, and our exploration too limited to dismiss the possibility that true lost cities await discovery. The question is not whether ancient cities can sink. The evidence proves they can. The real question is how far back the pattern extends. Did civilizations rise before the ones we know, building along coastlines now buried beneath the sea? And if they did, what remains of them? Perhaps the ruins we've already found are fragments of that story. Perhaps myths of Atlantis and Dwarka are not inventions, but memories of real places, swallowed by catastrophe. The ocean does not give up its secrets easily, but each dive, each sonar scan, each strange stone formation offers the faintest whisper of something older than history. What makes the idea even more haunting is the mirror it holds up to us. Today the world faces rising seas once again. Cities like Miami, Venice, and Shanghai are threatened by the encroaching ocean. If humanity disappeared tomorrow, future explorers might find their submerged remains and debate whether they were natural or artificial, myth or memory. We are living through the same cycle our ancestors may have endured, leaving behind ruins that in time could be dismissed as accidents of geology. The sunken ruins of the world are more than mysteries, they are warnings. They tell us that even the greatest civilizations can vanish beneath the waves, their existence reduced to whispers in myth and anomalies in stone. The ocean is both a destroyer and a preserver, erasing entire landscapes while entombing their remains. And somewhere in its depths may lie the definitive proof that we are not the first advanced civilization to walk this earth, only the most recent. If ruins beneath the waves suggest forgotten civilizations, then the strangest clues come not from whole cities, but from single objects, artifacts that seem possibly out of place, as if mocking the neat timeline of human history. Archaeologists call them out-of-place artifacts, or O-parts, and while many have been explained away, others continue to spark controversy. The very existence of such objects forces us to ask, what if our understanding of the past is incomplete? What if traces of lost civilizations survive, not in monuments but in small fragments scattered across time, pieces that don't fit the puzzle we've been taught? One of the most famous examples is the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck over a century ago. At first it was dismissed as a corroded lump of bronze. Only later did researchers realize it was a sophisticated device of gears and dials, capable of predicting eclipses and tracking celestial events with astonishing precision. For decades, scholars struggled to believe that such technology could exist in the ancient world, centuries before the development of similar clockwork in Europe. If not for the accident of its preservation underwater, the Antikythera mechanism might never have been recognized for what it was. And if one such object could survive, what other devices may have existed in even earlier times, now lost or unrecognizable? The mechanism is considered ahead of its time, but perhaps it was not ahead at all. Perhaps it was simply a fragment of a forgotten lineage of technology that stretches back further than we realize. Other artifacts raise even stranger questions. In the 19th century, miners in South Africa discovered mysterious metal spheres, some with grooves etched around their circumference, embedded in rock layers billions of years old. Mainstream scientists classify them as natural concretions formed by mineral processes, yet their uncanny symmetry and precise markings have fueled speculation. Are they purely natural, or are they fragments of something artificial that time has disguised as geology? If even one sphere were proven to be manufactured, it would rewrite the entire story of Earth's history. In 1889 in Illinois, a coal miner reportedly found an iron cup embedded in a chunk of coal, estimated to be 300 million years old. When the coal was broken apart, the cup fell out, leaving an impression behind. Skeptics argue that the story is anecdotal and unverified, but the tale persists as one of many strange discoveries of manufactured objects inside ancient rock. Similar accounts speak of nails, chains, or even hammers found embedded in stone or coal seams that should predate humanity by hundreds of millions of years. Most of these finds are written off as hoaxes, contamination, or misinterpretation. But what if even one is genuine? That would mean that someone was shaping metal on this planet long before our species ever evolved. Another controversial discovery is the so-called London hammer. Found in Texas in the 1930s, it consists of a hammerhead made of iron and a wooden handle, partially embedded in rock believed to be more than 100 million years old. Mainstream explanations suggest that the hammer itself is of relatively recent manufacture, and the rock formation may have grown around it due to mineralization. Yet believers point to its unusual metallurgy, which resists rust in ways modern iron does not. If authentic, the hammer would be evidence of tool-making at a time when no humans or even primates were supposed to exist. Then there are the enigmatic ancient batteries discovered in Mesopotamia. Known as the Baghdad batteries, these clay jars contain copper cylinders and iron rods, and when filled with an acidic liquid, they generate small electrical charges. Were they used for electroplating, healing rituals, or something else entirely? Mainstream archaeology suggests they were primitive chemical cells, but if so, it means people thousands of years ago were experimenting with electricity long before Benjamin Franklin flew his kite. Are these batteries a unique curiosity, or fragments of a larger, now lost body of knowledge? Not all out-of-place artifacts are technological. Some are cultural, hinting at contact across vast distances. Ancient maps, like the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, depict coastlines of South America and Antarctica with uncanny accuracy, centuries before official exploration. Scholars argue that the map was based on earlier charts, now lost, which may have preserved knowledge from civilizations capable of mapping the globe. If true, it would mean advanced seafaring existed long before the age of exploration. Could these maps be echoes of a maritime civilization erased by time, remembered only in fragments passed from one culture to the next? Equally baffling are the giant stone spheres scattered across Costa Rica. Some weigh dozens of tons and are nearly perfect in shape. Their origin and purpose remain unknown, though they are generally attributed to the Dwarka culture around one. But similar spheres have been found in Bosnia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world. Why did so many cultures, separated by distance and time, create massive stone spheres with no clear practical function? Were they symbols, markers, or remnants of an even older shared tradition? The uniformity suggests a mystery that mainstream explanations struggle to resolve. Skeptics argue, and often rightly so, that many out-of-place artifacts are misidentifications, natural formations mistaken for tools, or outright fabrications. But even if most can be dismissed, the persistence of the pattern is striking. Time and again, objects appear where they should not, displaying levels of technology or craftsmanship that don't fit the accepted timeline. It's easy to wave them away individually, but taken together they whisper a larger question. What if they are the surviving fragments of civilizations erased by deep time, their tools reduced to curiosities we cannot place? The challenge is not just proving authenticity, but interpretation. If a fragment of advanced metalwork were discovered in a coal seam, would mainstream science accept it as genuine, or would it be dismissed as impossible because it doesn't fit the model of history we already believe? The danger is that we may overlook real evidence simply because it challenges the narrative. In this way, the artifacts become not just mysteries of the past, but mirrors of our own biases. We demand that history be neat, but history is rarely neat. It is full of interruptions, resets, and lost chapters. Perhaps the most sobering truth about anomalous artifacts is this: even if they are genuine, they are rare. The survival of objects across millions of years is nearly impossible. Erosion, burial, and tectonic activity destroy nearly everything. That anything at all remains, be it a corroded device like the Antikythera mechanism, a strange metallic sphere, or a hammer in stone, is astonishing. These fragments may be all that's left of civilizations that once thrived. And if so, they are not just curiosities, they are messages. They tell us that our timeline may be incomplete, that the story of Earth is deeper and stranger than we allow ourselves to believe. The mystery of anomalous artifacts is not whether they exist, because they do, but whether we are willing to listen to what they might be telling us. A world that erases its past leaves behind only fragments, and fragments are easy to ignore. But when fragments begin to align, when they whisper the same story across continents and centuries, perhaps it's time to consider the possibility that they are not outliers at all. Perhaps they are the last surviving evidence of civilizations erased by time, leaving only objects too strange to explain, too persistent to ignore, and too dangerous to fit neatly into the story we tell ourselves. When we think about the most advanced technology of ancient civilizations, we imagine simple tools, stone axes, bronze swords, or rudimentary plows. Yet, across the world stand monuments so massive, so precise, and so mysterious that they seem to defy the capabilities of the cultures credited with building them. These sites challenge the limits of what we believe early humans could achieve. They raise an unsettling question. What if some of these feats are not just products of ingenuity with simple tools, but faint echoes of forgotten technologies that once existed and then vanished? The mystery deepens when you realize that many of these sites share something in common: techniques of engineering that even modern technology struggles to replicate. Consider the pyramids of Giza. Rising above the desert with mathematical precision, they are aligned with true north to a degree of accuracy almost impossible without advanced surveying tools. Each block weighs several tons, yet was fitted so tightly that even a razor blade cannot slip between them. Mainstream archaeology explains their construction as the result of thousands of workers using ropes, sledges, and ramps. But skeptics point out that despite centuries of study, no one has been able to reproduce such a structure with the same precision using only the tools available at the time. Even with today's cranes and machinery, building the pyramids exactly as they stand would be a monumental challenge. Was it simply determination and ingenuity, or was there once a forgotten method, a technology now lost to time, that made the impossible possible? The mystery extends far beyond Egypt. In South America, the ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia reveal stonework that seems to laugh at the idea of primitive tools. Gigantic blocks of granite and andesite are cut with machine-like precision, featuring interlocking joints and perfectly smooth surfaces. Some of the stones weigh over 100 tons, yet they were moved and set in place at altitudes exceeding 12,000 feet. Even more astonishing are the intricate H-shaped blocks, cut with such accuracy that they appear mass-produced. How could a culture without steel tools or wheels achieve this? Mainstream explanations suggest endless patience, ropes, and chisels, but many who have stood among the ruins find that answer unsatisfying. The level of precision hints at methods that go beyond what conventional history allows. Stonehenge in England presents another puzzle. Massive stones weighing up to 25 tons were transported from quarries over 150 miles away, Without wheels, cranes, or modern vehicles, how did Neolithic people move them across rivers, hills, and plains? Theories range from sledges on greased tracks to wooden rollers, but each explanation leaves gaps. The exact method remains uncertain, and the alignment of the stones with astronomical events suggests a level of scientific understanding we don't expect from people of that era. Perhaps they had technologies we have not yet recognized, methods that allowed them to move and align massive stones with precision far beyond their apparent means. In Lebanon, the ruins of Baalbek contain some of the largest stone blocks ever quarried. The stone of the pregnant woman weighs over 1,000 tons, yet was somehow cut, shaped, and transported in ancient times. Even today, moving such a block would require specialized equipment. How was it done without cranes or engines? Some argue it was never moved at all, but other massive blocks nearby prove otherwise. They were placed into the foundation of a temple complex with astonishing precision. If humans truly managed this with ropes and manpower alone, it represents an achievement almost beyond belief. But if they used some forgotten technology, perhaps a method of lifting or moving heavy stones that we no longer know, then Baalbek is evidence of knowledge erased by time. The Nazca Lines in Peru, another enigma. Massive geoglyphs stretch across the desert, depicting animals, shapes, and straight lines that can only be appreciated from the air. With no vantage points high enough nearby, why would ancient people design such enormous drawings visible only from above? Some suggest they were ritualistic, meant for gods or spirits. Others wonder if they hint at aerial knowledge, or even contact with beings who could see them from the skies. Regardless of interpretation, the creation of such precise, large-scale designs without modern surveying tools remains a technological mystery. Even older mysteries lie beneath the sands. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to around 12,000 years ago, predates Stonehenge by thousands of years, yet it features massive stone pillars, some weighing 20 tons, arranged in intricate circles with carvings of animals. According to mainstream history, humans at that time were still hunter-gatherers, with no permanent settlements or advanced tools. So how did they carve and move such stones? How did they plan such a complex site? Göbekli Tepe suggests that advanced knowledge existed earlier than we thought, and then vanished, resetting humanity's timeline. Was this a one-off anomaly, or the surviving fragment of a broader, forgotten tradition of engineering? The mysteries are not confined to stone alone. Ancient stories describe technologies that sound almost mythical today. Greek legends speak of Hephaestus, the god of the forge, creating automatons, mechanical servants that obeyed commands. Indian texts describe flying machines called vimanas, capable of traversing the skies with speed and power. The Bible recounts the Ark of the Covenant as an object with strange, almost electrical properties. Are these pure myths, or symbolic accounts of technologies that once existed but were later forgotten? The possibility cannot be dismissed outright, because myths often preserve echoes of reality. What makes these feats so striking is not just their scale, but their persistence across cultures. Everywhere we look, we find examples of ancient societies moving, shaping, and aligning stones in ways that defy explanation. Each site has its own mainstream theory, but taken together they form a pattern. People long ago did things we cannot easily replicate, using methods we cannot fully explain. And while skeptics argue that human determination alone is enough, the sheer global consistency suggests that perhaps something more was at play. If there was forgotten technology, what form might it have taken? Some theorize sound-based methods of levitation using resonance to move heavy stones. Others imagine advanced knowledge of counterweights, hydraulics, or magnetism. It may not have been machinery as we picture it today, but specialized techniques passed down through generations, then lost when civilizations collapsed. Time is ruthless. It erases not only cities but knowledge. Skills that once seemed indispensable can vanish in a single generation if not preserved. Entire crafts have been lost even in recent centuries. How much easier would it be for technologies to vanish across millennia? The true mystery of forgotten technologies is not just what they achieved, but how fragile knowledge really is. If something extraordinary existed in the past, it would not take much for it to disappear. Wars, disasters, and collapses can wipe away centuries of progress. Survivors carry only fragments forward, and myths take the place of manuals. To us, the results look impossible, but to them it may have been simply practical knowledge. We marvel at pyramids and megaliths, but to those who built them, the methods may have been as ordinary as cranes and engines are to us. We cannot reproduce their feats, not because they were impossible, but because the knowledge is gone. That possibility is both humbling and unsettling. It means we may not be the first to hold advanced knowledge. It means entire chapters of technological history may have been erased, leaving only monuments as clues. And it means our own technology, which feels so permanent, could vanish just as easily. If we disappeared tomorrow, our skyscrapers would crumble in centuries, our machines would rust, our satellites would fall from orbit. In 10,000 years, little would remain. In 100,000 years, almost enough future archaeologists might marvel at the few ruins that survived and wonder if we had technologies far beyond what they could imagine. They would be right, and yet they would never know the details. That is the haunting lesson of forgotten technologies. They remind us that history is not a straight line of progress, but a cycle of discovery and loss. What seems impossible may once have been ordinary. What we dismiss as myth may once have been memory, and what we see as the pinnacle of human achievement today may someday be nothing more than a puzzle to the next civilization, wondering how we did the impossible with tools they cannot imagine. The story of human history is usually told as a steady climb upward, from primitive tools to farming, from farming to cities, from cities to global empires. But when you peel back the surface, a different pattern emerges, a story not of linear progress, but of collapse and rebirth. Cataclysms, both natural and man-made, have repeatedly wiped the slate clean, forcing survivors to rebuild from the ground up. What makes this cycle chilling is the possibility that we are not the first to experience it. If advanced civilizations existed in deep time, they too may have been undone by catastrophe, leaving only faint traces in myth, stone, and anomaly. Ancient cataclysms are not just background events in history. They may be the very reason history appears so fragmented, as if entire chapters were erased in a single sweep. One of the most dramatic examples is the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden cooling that began about 12,800 years ago. Evidence suggests it was triggered by a cataclysmic event, possibly a comet impact, that set off massive fires, altered climates, and disrupted ecosystems worldwide. Glacial meltwater floods surged across continents, carving landscapes and drowning coastlines. For hunter-gatherer societies on the edge of building permanent settlements, this would have been devastating. Some researchers, like Graham Hancock, argue that this catastrophe may have wiped out a more advanced civilization that existed before recorded history, leaving behind only myths of a golden age destroyed by flood and fire. Mainstream science debates the comet theory, but the global evidence of abrupt destruction cannot be ignored. It is exactly the kind of event that would erase a civilization, leaving only scattered survivors to carry fragmented memory. But the Younger Dryas is not unique. The geological record is full of sudden resets. Around 74,000 years ago, the eruption of Mount Toba in Indonesia was one of the largest volcanic events in history, spewing ash that blanketed the globe. Some scientists believe it triggered a volcanic winter, reducing the human population to as few as a few thousand individuals. If there were advanced societies at the time, their traces would have been buried in ash, their memory erased in a generation. The survivors would have told stories of fire from the sky, of endless darkness, of gods angry with the world. In time, those stories became myth, but perhaps they were simply descriptions of what people had lived through. Other cataclysms came from the sea. As ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose by more than 300 feet, swallowing coastlines that had been home to countless settlements. Entire landscapes disappeared, leaving only myths of drowned kingdoms like Atlantis, Dwarka, or Kumari Kingdom. The survivors would have moved inland, their descendants preserving the memory and stories of a world consumed by water. Modern archaeology is only beginning to explore these submerged lands, and each discovery of ancient ruins beneath the ocean floor lends weight to the idea that cataclysms erased civilizations we no longer remember. Cosmic events, too, have left their scars. The Tunguska explosion of 1908 flattened over 800 square miles of Siberian forest, likely caused by a comet or asteroid exploding in the atmosphere. If such an event struck a populated area in ancient times, it could have annihilated entire cultures in an instant. and far larger impacts have occurred in Earth's past. The Chicxulub asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, proving that life on Earth is always vulnerable to cosmic catastrophe. If a similar event struck during a time of human or pre-human civilization, it would have left the same kind of global scar, erasing history as thoroughly as it erased species. Yet not all cataclysms come from nature. Some may be the result of human activity itself. Civilizations collapse when they overexploit resources, wage wars, or destabilize their own environments. The fall of Rome, the collapse of the Maya, the decline of the Indus Valley, all show how fragile societies are when faced with internal and external pressures. If this happens in recorded history, why not in prehistory as well? If advanced civilizations rose tens of thousands of years ago, they may have destroyed themselves through the same hubris, leaving behind only ruins and whispers. Their downfall would have been remembered not as history, but as morality tales, warnings about gods punishing arrogance, or floods cleansing the earth of corruption. What makes cataclysms so effective at erasing civilizations is their totality. A city may survive a war, but it cannot survive being buried under lava, drowned by sea, or obliterated by fire from the sky. A culture may preserve knowledge through books or inscriptions, but not if they are burned, shattered, or submerged. Time then finishes the job, grinding monuments into dust, scattering artifacts, and burying evidence beneath layers of earth. What remains to us thousands of years later is not a complete picture, but fragments, myths, anomalies, and ruins that seem out of place. To us, it looks like nothing existed, but in reality everything may have existed and been swept away. The pattern of cataclysm and reset is echoed in myths across the world. The Hopi people speak of worlds destroyed by fire, ice, and flood, with humanity now living in the fourth world. Hindu cosmology describes yugas, ages of creation and destruction, each ending in chaos before renewal. Norse mythology tells of Ragnarok, a fiery end followed by rebirth. The Maya recorded cycles of suns, each destroyed in catastrophe before the next rose. These stories are not isolated. They are global. They tell us that ancient people believed not in a linear history, but in repeating cycles of destruction. What if they were not speaking metaphorically? What if they were preserving the memory of real cataclysms that wiped away civilizations before our own? The unsettling implication is that our modern civilization is not unique. We may not be the first to reach advanced levels of knowledge and technology. We may simply be the latest in a long line of societies that rose, thrived, and then collapsed under the weight of cataclysm. The difference is that we have the illusion of permanence. We believe our technology, our records, our satellites, and our cities will preserve us in memory forever. But the truth is, we are just as fragile. A single cosmic impact, supervolcano, or global flood could erase us just as it erased those who came before. In 100,000 years, little would remain. In 1,000,000 years, almost nothing. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. If there were civilizations before us, they too must have thought themselves secure, masters of their age. Yet they vanished, leaving only whispers. We are repeating the cycle, unaware that we might be next. Our skyscrapers and servers will crumble, our satellites will burn, our libraries will rot, and future beings will walk the earth, wondering if they are the first or if others came before. They will find fragments, anomalous artifacts, myths of floods and fire, ruins beneath the sea, and they will ask the same questions we are asking now. Cataclysms are the great erasers of history. They reset the clock, forcing survivors to rebuild from the ashes. Each reset leaves the faintest traces, but rarely the full story. That is why history feels incomplete. Because it is. We are reading a book missing entire chapters, chapters torn out by fire, water, and stone. And perhaps if we are not careful, our own chapter will someday be ripped out as well, leaving only faint whispers for the civilizations yet to come. When we lift our eyes from Earth and stare into the night sky, the universe looks alive with possibility. Billions of stars, billions of planets, countless opportunities for life to emerge, grow, and advance. Logic suggests that we cannot be alone. Statistically, the galaxy should be teeming with civilizations, some younger, some older, some unimaginably advanced. And yet the silence is deafening. This silence is the essence of the Fermi paradox, named after the physicist Enrico Fermi, who asked a simple, unsettling question: Where is everybody? If intelligent life is common, why haven't we seen it? Why don't we detect signals, artifacts, or visits? And why does the night sky, so full of stars, feel so empty? The paradox takes on a haunting dimension when considered alongside the mysteries of Earth's own history. Perhaps the silence we hear in space is the same silence we struggle with on Earth. The silence left behind when civilizations vanish. If advanced societies once rose here and fell, leaving only faint traces, perhaps the galaxy itself is filled with civilizations that bloomed and died, erased by time, cataclysm, or their own mistakes. The silence may not mean we are alone. It may mean we are latecomers, wandering through a universe littered with the ruins of those who came before. One explanation for the silence is the concept of the Great Filter. This idea suggests that somewhere between the formation of life and the rise of a galaxy-spanning civilization, there lies a barrier so difficult that almost no species can cross it. The filter could be at the beginning. Perhaps life itself is incredibly rare, requiring conditions so precise that Earth is a cosmic anomaly. Or the filter could be ahead of us, waiting in the future, an inevitable catastrophe that destroys civilizations when they reach a certain level of advancement. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, uncontrolled artificial intelligence, or cosmic disasters could all serve as filters. If that is the case, the silence of the stars may not be a comfort, but a warning. We may be rushing toward the same fate as those who came before. But there is another possibility, one more unsettling still. Perhaps the silence is not universal, but specific. Perhaps civilizations have existed, both here on Earth and across the galaxy, but they do not last long enough to overlap. Imagine civilizations rising like candles in a dark room. Each burns brightly for a time, illuminating its world, perhaps even sending out signals, but then each flame sputters out, leaving darkness once more. The odds of two candles burning side by side in the same moment may be vanishingly small. If that is the case, then we are not alone. We are simply too late to meet those who came before, and too early to meet those who may come after. The silence also raises the possibility that civilizations deliberately hide. This is known as the dark forest hypothesis, borrowed from the idea that the universe is like a dark forest filled with hunters. Each civilization is both predator and prey, never knowing whether another will be friend or foe. In such a forest, the safest strategy is silence, hiding, never signaling, waiting in the shadows. Perhaps advanced civilizations do not broadcast their presence, because they know survival depends on staying hidden. If so, then the quiet of the night sky is not emptiness but caution, the silence of countless civilizations holding their breath in the dark. And if Earth once held advanced societies, perhaps they too chose silence, vanishing not only from history but from the cosmos, leaving behind nothing but faint whispers in stone and myth. When we consider the silence of the stars alongside Earth's mysteries, the parallels are chilling. We search for signals in the cosmos just as we search for ruins in the ground, hoping for proof that we are not alone. But both searches are constrained by time. Civilizations, whether on Earth or across the galaxy, may not endure long enough to be found. Their signals fade, their monuments crumble, and all that remains is silence. We mistake that silence for absence, but in reality, it may be the residue of countless stories erased by time. This perspective reframes Earth's anomalies. Out-of-place artifacts, ancient myths, and lost cities may be the local version of the cosmic silence. Just as we fail to detect civilizations among the stars, we fail to detect them beneath our feet. The evidence may exist, but it is subtle, fragmented, or erased. Just as we peer into the cosmos and see nothing, we dig into the Earth and tell ourselves there was nothing. The truth may be that both Earth and the galaxy are filled with vanished civilizations, and we are only now beginning to recognize the pattern. Some have suggested that Earth itself may be part of a galactic experiment, a kind of cradle watched over by civilizations too advanced to reveal themselves. This idea, often called the zoo hypothesis, imagines that others are out there but choose not to interfere, allowing us to grow and develop on our own. If that is the case, then the silence is not true silence but restraint. The same could be true of Earth's forgotten civilization. Perhaps they withdrew, disappeared, or ascended to levels we cannot comprehend, leaving behind myths and ruins as breadcrumbs. The silence may be less about absence and more about separation, a gap we are not yet ready to bridge. The paradox grows sharper when we consider the vast timescales of the universe. Our civilization has been transmitting radio signals for barely a century. Our recorded history spans only a few thousand years. Compared to the billions of years the galaxy has existed, our presence is a blink. If other civilizations arose millions or even billions of years ago, their signals may have come and gone long before we were here to hear them. Their monuments may lie in ruins on planets we have not yet reached, their stories erased except for faint echoes in myth and geology. Just as Earth hides its lost civilizations beneath layers of time, the galaxy may hide its civilizations across vast gulfs of space and chronology. And perhaps that is the true resolution of the Fermi paradox. The universe is not empty, it is haunted by civilizations that rose and fell, leaving behind silence as their final legacy. We are not alone, but we are isolated, stranded in time, unable to overlap with those who came before or those who may come after. The silence is not a void, it is an echo, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even the brightest civilizations. For us, the lesson is sobering. The silence of the stars may be a mirror, showing us our own fragility. Just as Earth's possible lost civilizations were erased by cataclysm, neglect, or collapse, so too could we be erased. Our skyscrapers, satellites, and digital archives may not survive the test of time. A million years from now, if someone else walks this planet, they may wonder the same thing we do. Were they the first? Or were there others who came before, leaving behind only faint whispers drowned in silence? The Fermi paradox is more than a cosmic riddle. It is a warning. It tells us that survival is not guaranteed, that civilizations may be as fragile as sandcastles before the tide. It reminds us that silence is not absence, but erasure, and that unless we learn to endure, we too may vanish into the quiet. The stars do not speak, not because there is nothing to say, but because the voices that once filled the galaxy have already faded. Earth's lost civilizations may be their reflection, a small-scale version of the same mystery. We are surrounded by silence above us and beneath us, and the true question is not where is everybody, but how long before we join them in the dark. Human memory is a fragile thing. As individuals, we forget more than we remember, and as societies, the effect is magnified. Civilizations rise and fall, but their collective knowledge rarely survives intact. Libraries burn, oral traditions break, scripts become unreadable, and meaning is lost. What we call history is not the sum of everything that happened, but the slivers that survived the decay of time. This selective survival is why the story of humanity often feels incomplete, like we are walking into a theatre halfway through a play. The idea of human amnesia is not just metaphorical, it is literal. We have forgotten vast portions of our past and perhaps entire civilizations that came before us, their stories erased not by choice, but by the natural fading of memory. Consider the fragility of records. The Library of Alexandria once contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, holding the accumulated wisdom of ancient civilizations. Yet all it took was fire and neglect for those texts to vanish forever. The knowledge of entire cultures, lost in smoke, reduced to myth and speculation. Now imagine a catastrophe not just at one library, but at the scale of continents. If a global cataclysm destroyed our digital archives today, how much would survive after 1,000 years? Hard drives would corrode, paper would rot, buildings would crumble. Survivors might pass stories orally, but those stories would degrade in accuracy with each retelling. Within a few generations, facts would become legends, and legends would become myth. In a few thousand years, archaeologists might find only fragments, confused, incomplete, and interpreted through the lens of whatever culture came next. If this is how memory functions, how much of our true history has already been lost? Archaeology often highlights this problem. Ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey demonstrate how advanced some early societies were, building massive stone temples 11,000 years ago, long before agriculture was thought to have emerged. Its discovery rewrote history, proving that what we had forgotten was not trivial. It revealed a society capable of complex architecture and ritual long before our textbooks said such things were possible. And yet for centuries we knew nothing of it. If one site can shift our entire understanding, what else lies buried, waiting to remind us of what we forgot? What if we've already lost not just years, but millennia of crucial memory? Human amnesia is reinforced by the cycles of storytelling. Myths, legends, and folklore preserve fragments of real events, but over time, they become obscured. The story of a flood becomes the legend of a world-cleansing deluge. The memory of a meteor strike becomes the tale of gods casting fire from the heavens. The destruction of a city becomes the myth of divine punishment. Each retelling adds layers of symbolism until the historical core is barely recognizable. Yet within those myths may lie the last echoes of forgotten civilizations. Flood stories appear in cultures across the globe, from the Bible's Noah to Mesopotamia's Gilgamesh to India's Manu. Are these coincidences, or are they distorted memories of the same cataclysm passed down through countless generations, reshaped until fact and fiction fused? Another layer of this amnesia comes from deliberate erasure. Victors in war rewrite history, destroying the records of those they conquer. Ancient Egypt went so far as to chisel out the names of pharaohs they wished forgotten, effectively erasing them from cultural memory. Entire dynasties became shadows, their existence revealed only centuries later by archaeologists piecing together fragments. If erasure happened within recorded history, imagine what might have happened in prehistoric times, when there were no widespread systems of writing. Entire civilizations could have been wiped from memory, their stories reduced to silence by their conquerors, their monuments dismantled, their achievements lost to time. Even our perception of progress is shaped by amnesia. We assume that civilization is a steady climb, but evidence suggests otherwise. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off Greece, is an intricate device over 2,000 years old, capable of predicting astronomical movements with mechanical precision. For centuries, we thought such technology impossible for the ancient world. It should not exist according to our timeline, yet there it is, proof that knowledge was gained and lost. If such advanced understanding could disappear once, why not many times? Why not entire epochs of forgotten brilliance? Human amnesia hides not only what we never knew, but also what we once knew and then lost. Language plays a crucial role in this forgetfulness. Writing is a recent invention in human history, only a few thousand years old. Before that, knowledge depended on speech and memory, which are vulnerable to distortion. Even written languages decay. Scripts become undecipherable without living users. The Indus Valley script remains unreadable to this day, locking away the knowledge of one of the world's earliest civilizations. What if older scripts existed, but their symbols were lost completely, leaving us unable to even recognize them as writing? What if layers of human history lie before us, invisible not because they didn't exist, but because we have no memory, no language to interpret them? Modern psychology offers another perspective. Individuals repress traumatic memories, burying them deep in the unconscious. Perhaps humanity does the same on a collective scale. Catastrophes like floods, volcanic eruptions, or wars may have scarred early humans so deeply that their descendants remembered them only as symbols. Instead of processing the events as history, they turned them into myths of wrathful gods, fiery punishments, or world-ending cycle. Collective amnesia may not be accidental but protective, a way for societies to survive trauma without carrying the unbearable weight of memory. In this light, myths of destruction may be echoes of real events too terrifying to preserve in literal form. There is also a sobering irony. While we speculate about forgotten civilizations of the past, we may be living in one of our own. If humanity collapsed tomorrow, how much of us would survive in memory? A few thousand years later, skyscrapers would be dust, satellites would have burned in the atmosphere, and plastic would erode into microfragments. Our greatest libraries are digital, vulnerable to even brief lapses in electricity. The future civilization might find scattered remnants of steel and glass, but would they be able to reconstruct our world from those fragments? Or would they tell stories of a lost golden age, of gods with machines, of a people who vanished without a trace? We could easily become another victim of human amnesia, another civilization remembered only through whispers in myth. The role of human amnesia, then, is central to the mystery of lost civilizations. It explains why the record feels so incomplete, why anomalies stand out like shards of glass in sand, and why myths persist even when history insists they are fiction. It reminds us that forgetting is not an accident, it is the default. Remembering takes effort, preservation, and luck has not always been on humanity's side. What makes this amnesia so dangerous is that it blinds us to patterns. If we forget past collapses, we fail to see the warning signs of future ones. If we erase the memory of ancient knowledge, We reinvent the wheel instead of building on it. If we ignore the whispers of forgotten civilizations, we may walk the same path they did, unaware of the mistakes that led to their downfall. Amnesia is not just a gap in the record, it is a trap, ensuring that each civilization believes it is the first and perhaps condemning each to repeat the cycle of rise and fall. The silence of the stars and the silence of Earth's past are connected by this forgetfulness. Both are shaped by absence, by memory lost, by voices erased. We may never recover the full story, but the fragments we do find remind us of a haunting truth. Forgetting is easy, but survival is not. Human amnesia may be the greatest filter of all, ensuring that the story of civilization is never complete, only glimpsed through fragments and whispers. History as it's written follows a clean line. The story goes, humans were hunter-gatherers, then they discovered farming, then came cities, and eventually technology. But scattered across the world are anomalies that don't fit neatly into that timeline. Artifacts and discoveries that suggest something else may have been happening, something that official narratives often prefer to ignore. These objects are known as out-of-place artifacts, or OP-arts, and they are among the most tantalizing hints that human civilization may have deeper, stranger roots than we acknowledge. Each OP-art is a small crack in the story we've been told, a whisper from the past that doesn't line up, and when you gather enough of them, the picture becomes hard to dismiss. One of the most famous examples is the Antikythera mechanism, a device pulled from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in At first it looked like a lump of corroded bronze, but X-rays revealed it was a complex machine made of interlocking gears, capable of predicting solar eclipses and tracking planetary movements with astonishing precision. The craftsmanship is so advanced that it rivals clockwork not seen again until 1,000 years later. According to our textbooks, the Greeks shouldn't have had the technology to make such a device, and yet there it is. Mainstream historians call it an outlier, a marvel ahead of its time, but others wonder if it is evidence of knowledge preserved from a far older, forgotten civilization. Then there are the artifacts that seem to stretch even further back, beyond recorded history entirely. In coal mines in Russia and China, workers have reported finding metal objects embedded in seams dated to hundreds of thousands of years old. Spiral-shaped objects, metallic spheres, and even what look like manufactured parts. Skeptics argue these are natural formations, mineral crystallizations that happen to look artificial. But the sheer number of such reports, combined with the suspiciously mechanical shapes, raises unsettling questions. If even one of these objects is genuinely artificial, then it rewrites everything we think we know about human history. Another category of forbidden evidence lies in ancient maps. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral, shows coastlines that should have been impossible to chart at the time. Most famously, an accurate depiction of Antarctica, drawn centuries before the continent was officially discovered. Some argue it was copied from older maps now lost, passed down from civilizations that had global seafaring knowledge far earlier than believed. How did they know the shape of Antarctica under the ice? If accurate, it suggests cartographic knowledge beyond the capabilities of early modern explorers, perhaps preserved from an earlier age. Stone carvings, too, present mysteries. At temples in Egypt, India, and South America, engravings depict objects that resemble modern technology, flying craft, submarines, even figures wearing what look like helmets. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these as symbolic or coincidental resemblances, but the similarities are striking. If taken literally, they suggest ancient people were recording encounters with technology, or beings far beyond their own capabilities. Were these depictions memories of an advanced civilization, or are we glimpsing distorted interpretations of contact with something or someone else? The forbidden archaeology debate thrives because so many of these anomalies are dismissed rather than investigated. Professional archaeologists often brand such evidence as hoaxes, misinterpretations, or outright fraud, and sometimes they're right, there have been hoaxes, but that doesn't explain all the anomalies. The pattern of dismissal has created a growing divide between mainstream history and alternative researchers who argue that the past is far stranger than we admit. Scholars like Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archaeology, argue that human civilization may be millions of years older than the conventional timeline suggests. He points to evidence of advanced stone tools found in geological layers far older than humanity itself, suggesting either a timeline error or the existence of forgotten civilization. What makes this debate so powerful is not just the artifacts themselves, but the human instinct to control narrative. History is written by those who win wars, fund expeditions, and guard institutions. When evidence threatens the accepted story, it often disappears into museum basements, dismissed before the public can ask too many questions. For example, reports from the 19th century describe giant human skeletons unearthed in North America, some over 7 feet tall, buried in mounds that predate Native American cultures. These reports appeared in newspapers of the time, but rarely made it into academic journal. Were they hoaxes, or was something deliberately suppressed because it contradicted the prevailing model of human history? The reluctance to accept anomalies may stem from fear of rewriting everything, fear of being ridiculed, or fear of admitting how fragile our knowledge truly is. If civilizations existed long before our recorded history, then our current understanding of progress collapses. We are not the pinnacle of a slow, steady climb, but simply one more chapter in a long, cyclical story of rise and fall. The forbidden archaeology debate threatens not just the details of history, but its entire framework. Consider the mystery of the Baghdad battery, a set of clay jars with copper and iron components discovered in Iraq. When reconstructed, they function as primitive batteries, capable of producing a small electric charge. Mainstream historians argue they may have been used for electroplating or as simple curiosities, but why would such knowledge exist in the ancient world, only to vanish and re-emerge millennia later? Once again, we see the pattern of knowledge gained, lost, and rediscovered, as if humanity is continually relearning secrets it once knew. The most haunting aspect of OBL parts is that they suggest memory loss on a grand scale. If an advanced civilization existed tens of thousands of years ago, its remains would be almost invisible by now. Metal corrodes, wood rots, stone crumbles, and even monumental structures erode into dust. What would survive are the anomalies, the artifacts that by chance found preservation embedded in rock, buried in caves, hidden beneath the sea. These fragments, out of place in our tidy timeline, are the last whispers of a story erased by cataclysm and time. We call them anomalies because they don't fit, but perhaps they are the only real evidence we have left. Forbidden archaeology challenges us to look at the gaps, not the lines, to ask why so much feels missing, to wonder why myths of great floods, lost continents, and sky gods echo across the world, supported by artifacts that mainstream science struggles to explain. The anomalies may not all be genuine, but even a handful of real ones is enough to topple the entire structure of what we think we know. Out-of-place artifacts are not curiosities, they are clues, fragments of a forgotten history we are only beginning to rediscover. And that is what makes the forbidden archaeology debate so compelling. It is not just about whether a single artifact is real or fake, it is about whether humanity's story is vastly older, richer, and stranger than we dare to admit. It forces us to confront the possibility that we are not the first civilization to rise, nor will we be the last to fall. Every OA part is a reminder that history is not a finished book, but a puzzle missing most of its pieces, pieces scattered across time and buried in silence. To ignore them is to accept amnesia. To study them is to risk rewriting the story of everything. The past is often portrayed as simple, primitive, and undeveloped compared to our own age. We imagine ancient people as struggling with survival, building crude shelters, and slowly stumbling their way toward progress. Yet, when we look closely at the evidence left behind, a different picture emerges, one filled with startling sophistication, advanced knowledge and mysteries of engineering and science that even today remain difficult to explain. This idea of lost knowledge is not just a romantic fantasy, it is supported by countless examples across the globe, suggesting that ancient civilizations may have possessed scientific understanding far beyond what we give them credit for, knowledge that was either deliberately hidden, catastrophically erased, or simply lost in the tides of time. Take, for instance, the monumental architecture of antiquity. The Great Pyramid of Giza has stood for more than 4,500 years, yet its construction still raises questions that modern engineers struggle to answer. We are told it was built with copper chisels and ropes, but the precision of the stone cutting, the alignment with cardinal directions, and the astronomical accuracy suggests something more. The base is nearly a perfect square, aligned to true north with a precision that would be difficult even with today's GPS technology. Each block, some weighing over 70 tons, was placed with a level of exactness that baffles experts. Was this simply the product of trial and error over generations, or evidence of a lost science knowledge of engineering, astronomy and mathematics that was later forgotten? Similar mysteries abound across the world. In South America, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru features massive stone walls made of irregular blocks, fitted together so perfectly that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The stones are enormous, some weighing hundreds of tons, yet they were lifted, shaped and locked together without mortar. At Pumapunku, part of the ancient Tiwanaku complex in Bolivia, blocks of andesite stone are carved with machine-like precision, featuring grooves and drill holes that resemble modern stone-cutting techniques. How did people with supposedly primitive tools achieve such feats? Some argue it was ingenuity and patience, but others see in these ruins the fingerprints of lost technologies that vanished when their civilizations collapsed. Beyond architecture, ancient science appears in texts and artifacts that defy expectations. The Sumerians, more than 5,000 years ago, charted the movements of planets with astonishing accuracy, even including Uranus and Neptune, planets that are invisible to the naked eye, and were not officially discovered until the invention of telescopes millennia later. The ancient Indians wrote in the Vedas about Vimanas, flying machines powered by unknown energy sources. In Greece, philosophers like Democritus and Leucippus theorized about atoms, the building blocks of matter, long before modern science confirmed their existence. How could such advanced concepts emerge in cultures supposedly at the dawn of civilization? Were these flashes of brilliance isolated strokes of genius, or remnants of older knowledge passed down through fragments and oral tradition? The lost sciences also extend into medicine. The Egyptians practiced advanced surgical techniques, evidenced by mummies with healed fractures and trepanation holes showing survival after brain surgery. Ancient Indian texts like the Sushruta Samhita describe procedures that rival modern surgical practices, including cataract removal and plastic surgery. Herbal knowledge, too, was astonishingly advanced. Plants with potent medicinal properties were catalogued, tested, and used effectively. Knowledge only rediscovered by modern pharmacology thousands of years later, yet much of this knowledge was lost or buried, replaced by superstition or destroyed when empires fell. What might we still know today if those chains of transmission had not been broken? Astronomy offers another striking case. Stonehenge in England, Newgrange in Ireland, Chichen Itza in Mexico, and countless other megalithic sites are aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. These alignments show not only awareness but precise measurement of celestial movements, requiring generations of observation. The Nazca lines of Peru stretch across the desert in vast geoglyphs, some aligning with astronomical events, visible only from above. How could ancient people have conceived and executed projects on such a scale, with no modern instruments, unless they inherited knowledge from cultures before them? The sophistication is undeniable, and it hints at a scientific tradition far older than our history books suggest. The phenomenon of lost knowledge is not limited to material achievements. Philosophical and mathematical insights, too, appear as anomalies. The Mayan calendar was capable of tracking time across spans of thousands of years with startling accuracy, predicting solar and lunar eclipses better than European systems at the time of contact. The Babylonians developed advanced trigonometry, using a base 60 system that in some respects surpasses the efficiency of modern decimal-based math. The Dogon people of Mali have traditions describing the star Sirius and its companion star Sirius B, which is invisible without powerful telescopes. How did they know? Skeptics argue coincidence or later contamination of their traditions, but others see it as evidence of knowledge that somehow survived long after the original sources were forgotten. The destruction of knowledge is one of history's greatest tragedies. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is often cited, but it was far from the only loss. Libraries in Mesopotamia, temples in Mesoamerica, and entire archives in China were destroyed in wars or by rulers who sought to control the narrative of history. With each act of destruction, knowledge vanished, some of it rediscovered centuries later, much of it gone forever. What we call progress may simply be rediscovery, pieces of a greater mosaic that once existed but was shattered into fragments. Even myths may preserve fragments of lost science. Stories of Atlantis, for example, describe a civilization with advanced technology, immense power, and a tragic downfall. Plato insisted it was not allegory, but history. Flood myths across the world may recall not only geological cataclysms, but also the destruction of societies that held advanced knowledge. The Vedas describe cosmic cycles and astronomical phenomena with eerie accuracy. The Bible's stories of long-lived patriarchs may reflect a time when lifespans were genuinely different due to knowledge of health, environment, or even genetics that has since been lost. One of the most sobering aspects of this idea is how quickly knowledge can vanish. Imagine if modern civilization collapsed tomorrow. Within a generation, most of our digital data would be unreadable without functioning machines. Within a few centuries, skyscrapers would crumble, highways would erode, and satellites would fall. Survivors would tell stories of gods of light, flying machines, and magic screens. Within 1,000 years, those stories would become mythology. Within 10,000 years, little trace of our science would remain, save for fragments of plastic, radioactive isotopes, or ruins buried under sediment. If this could happen to us, why not to civilizations long before us? The concept of lost knowledge forces us to rethink progress itself. We are not necessarily the pinnacle of human achievement, but perhaps just the latest in a series of rises and falls. Knowledge comes in bursts, is preserved for a time, and then vanishes, only to be rediscovered later. Each time, we assume we are the first to uncover these truths. But the evidence, scattered, fragmentary, yet compelling, suggests otherwise. We may be living in a world built on forgotten foundations, our science not entirely new, but an echo of something far older. And this brings us to the most unsettling possibility. What if ancient civilizations possessed sciences we still do not understand? What if they tapped into energies, technologies, or principles of nature that have yet to be rediscovered? Could the secrets of their lost knowledge hold the key to our own survival or our destruction? If we do not search for them, if we continue to dismiss anomalies and myths we may never know, and in that ignorance we risk repeating their mistakes, walking blindly into the same cycles of brilliance and collapse that have haunted humanity since the beginning. When we think of myths, we tend to treat them as stories, allegories crafted to explain natural phenomena or teach moral lessons. We imagine them as imaginative fictions of pre-scientific societies, metaphors for forces they could not understand. But what if myths are more than stories? What if they are fragments of memory, distorted but not entirely fabricated, passed down through generations as the only way to preserve events too vast or too traumatic to forget? Across the world, separated by oceans and thousands of years, cultures share myths that echo the same themes: great floods, fire from the sky, gods descending from the heavens, golden ages destroyed, and cycles of creation and destruction. The similarities are too striking to ignore. It is as if humanity carries a shared memory, one that transcends geography and language, a memory of catastrophes and civilizations lost. The most widespread myth is that of the flood, from Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible story of Noah, from India's tale of Manu to the Aztec legend of the sun destroyed by water. The narrative is nearly identical. The great deluge covers the world, destroying everything, sparing only a chosen few to repopulate the earth. Some see this as metaphor for human renewal, but geological evidence of massive floods at the end of the last ice age provides another explanation. When glaciers melted and sea levels rose, coastlines disappeared, swallowing entire cultures. Survivors may have preserved the memory and story, retold generation after generation, until it became myth. What appears as religious allegory may in fact be the last testimony of people who watched their world drown. Equally compelling are myths of fire from the sky. The Hopi speak of a previous world destroyed by fire, while the Norse told of Ragnarok, when the heavens would collapse in flame. The Aztecs described a sun destroyed by burning, and the Hindu tradition tells of cycles of destruction by fire and flood. These stories may recall cosmic impacts like the Younger Dryas event, when a comet or fragments of one may have struck Earth, igniting wildfires and plunging the planet into chaos. To early humans, the fire falling from above would have seemed like divine wrath, and the survivors preserved the event as myth. When stories of fire, flood, and cataclysm appear across continents, independent of each other, we should question whether they are coincidence or collective memory of real events. The theme of gods descending from the sky is equally intriguing. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki are said to have come down from the heavens bringing knowledge and civilization. In the Americas, figures like Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha are described as bearded men arriving from across the sea, teaching agriculture, astronomy, and laws. In Hindu mythology, deities ride vimanas, flying craft that traverse the sky. Even in Polynesian traditions, culture heroes arrive in canoes from distant lands, bearing gifts of knowledge. Could these stories represent encounters with survivors of earlier advanced civilizations, wandering the earth after their homelands were destroyed? Or do they hint at something even stranger, beings from beyond our world? Either way, the recurrence of this motif suggests that humanity's myths may preserve memories of teachers who were not ordinary mortal. Golden ages are another recurring theme. The Greeks spoke of the age of Kronos, a time when humanity lived in harmony, free of toil and suffering. Hinduism describes the Satya Yuga, an age of truth and abundance, followed by successive declines into darkness. The Maya recorded cycles of suns, each ending in catastrophe, followed by renewal. The Hopi speak of worlds destroyed and rebuilt, with humanity now living in the fourth. These are not isolated stories, they form a global pattern, a vision of history as cyclical rather than linear, with civilizations rising to greatness before being swept away by disaster. This view aligns uncomfortably well with the archaeological record, which shows not a steady climb of progress, but sudden leaps forward, followed by collapses into dark ages. Perhaps the myths are telling us what history refuses to admit, that human civilization has risen and fallen many times. What makes the global myth connection so compelling is the universality of its themes. Cultures separated by oceans tell the same stories, often with uncanny detail. How could ancient peoples in South America and Mesopotamia, with no contact, both tell stories of floods destroying the world? How could Norse and Hindu myths both emphasize cycles of fire and water? Either these are coincidences born of human imagination, or they are echoes of shared experiences, memories of global events preserved in story. Myths, then, are not merely symbolic. They may be humanity's oldest historical record, written not on stone tablets but in the living tradition of oral storytelling. Even stranger are the myths that contain precise scientific detail. The Dogon people of Mali speak of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, and its invisible companion star, Sirius B, which cannot be seen without modern telescopes. Their stories describe the orbit of Sirius B with uncanny accuracy. Skeptics argue this knowledge must have been introduced later, but the tradition predates Western astronomy in the region. In India, the Mahabharata describes weapons that resemble nuclear blasts, with bright flashes, scorching heat, and fallout that poisons the land. In Greece, myths of Hephaestus describe automatons, mechanical beings crafted from metal. Are these simply creative imaginations or distorted memories of advanced knowledge now lost? The forbidden nature of these myths lies not in their content, but in their implications. If myths are memories, then our history books are incomplete. They tell us we began civilization a few thousand years ago. Yet myths suggest memories stretching back tens of thousands of years, to times when great catastrophes reshaped the world. If we accept myths as historical testimony, even in fragmentary form, then the human story is far older, richer, and more complex than we are taught. But myths also serve another purpose. They warn. Flood myths are not just about destruction, but about renewal. They remind us that civilizations fall, but survivors endure. Myths of fire warn of the fragility of life in the face of cosmic catastrophe. Myths of golden ages remind us that prosperity is fleeting, that decline is inevitable unless wisdom is preserved. These are not just stories, they are lessons passed down from ancestors who lived through cataclysm and wanted future generations to remember. The tragedy is that we often dismiss them as fiction, forgetting that even legends carry truth. The global myth connection challenges us to rethink how we view ancient knowledge. Instead of treating myths as primitive imagination, we might see them as encrypted memory, history encoded in narrative, preserved because it could not be recorded any other way. The consistency across cultures suggests not coincidence but convergence, not invention but recollection. What humanity has forgotten in science and history has preserved in story, waiting for us to listen. Perhaps the myths exist because deep down, we know that cycles of destruction are part of the human story. We know that civilizations rise and fall, and that we may be walking the same path as those before us. Myths are warnings whispered across millennia, urging us to remember what we have forgotten, to prepare for what may come again. If we ignore them, we risk repeating the cycle. If we listen, perhaps we can break it. When we think of time, we imagine a straight line, We picture history as a timeline stretching from primitive beginnings toward ever greater complexity, with ourselves standing at the cutting edge of progress. But this modern view of linear time is relatively new. For most of human history, civilizations did not see time as a line at all, but as a circle, an endless cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal. Myths, calendars, and sacred texts across the globe insist that humanity has lived through multiple ages, each rising to greatness only to be swept away and replaced by the next. What if these weren't just symbolic frameworks, but faint recollections of real cycles of forgotten ages, civilizations lost and reborn in rhythms far older than our textbooks suggest? In Hindu cosmology, time is divided into yugas, vast epochs that repeat endlessly. The Satya Yuga, or Golden Age, is a time of harmony, abundance, and truth. But as the ages progress through Treta, Dvapara, and Kali Yuga, the world declines into chaos, ignorance, and conflict. Each cycle ends in cataclysm, only to be reborn again. According to this tradition, we live now in the Kali Yuga, the darkest age, but even this darkness will eventually give way to another golden dawn. In Mayan tradition too, time was cyclical, with each sun representing an age of the world. They believed we currently live in the fifth sun, the previous four having been destroyed by water, fire, wind, and jaguars. The Hopi tell of four worlds, three already destroyed and the fourth now in motion. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, the fiery end of one age followed by renewal in another. The pattern is unmistakable. Civilizations across the world, separated by oceans and millennia, all saw history not as linear, but as cyclical, repeating endlessly in waves of rise and fall. This idea of cycles resonates eerily with what science has begun to uncover. Geological records reveal catastrophic events occurring with unsettling regularity, ice ages advancing and retreating, supervolcanoes erupting, comets striking Earth, and sea levels rising and falling. Each of these events reshaped the planet, wiping out species, altering climates, and forcing humans to adapt or perish. Perhaps myths of cyclical destruction are not allegories, but cultural memories of these recurring cataclysms, encoded as stories so they would not be forgotten. Each time humanity rose, catastrophe struck, plunging survivors into dark ages where knowledge was lost, only for the cycle to begin again. If so, then our history is not a steady climb, but a spiral circling upward and downward in repeating patterns. Evidence of these cycles exists in archaeology as well. The sudden collapse of great civilizations, the Indus Valley, the Maya, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, even Rome, suggests that societies can thrive for centuries only to disintegrate almost overnight. Often their downfall is linked to environmental change, famine, disease, or conflict. Echoes of the cataclysms described in myth. On a larger scale, the Younger Dryas event, around 12,800 years ago, looks like a reset button pressed on early human progress, plunging the world into chaos just as agriculture and settlement were beginning to spread. What if this wasn't the first reset? What if it was simply the latest in a series of forgotten ages, each erased by time and disaster? The cyclical concept of time also challenges our sense of uniqueness. In a linear worldview, we are the pinnacle, the first to achieve spaceflight, digital technology, and global civilization. But in a cyclical worldview, we are not unique at all. We are simply another iteration in an endless loop, destined to rise, flourish, and eventually collapse like those before us. The ruins and anomalies we find, advanced stonework, unexplained artifacts, myths of lost ages, may be remnants of previous cycles, faint evidence that others once stood where we stand now. Just as we may one day be reduced to myth in the memory of future generations, perhaps we are already living atop the ruins of civilizations erased from memory long ago. The ancients may have understood this more deeply than we do. Their calendars were not simply tools for tracking days, but sacred systems for marking cycles of creation and destruction. The Mayan long count calendar, for example, tracked vast spans of time, culminating in end dates that signaled not apocalypse, but transition from one age to another. To them, the end of an age was not final, but part of a recurring rhythm. Hindu cosmology stretches this idea to incomprehensible scales, with cycles lasting billions of years, yet repeating endlessly. Even Plato wrote of cycles, describing in Timaeus and Critias how civilizations rise and fall, their knowledge washed away by floods and fire, leaving survivors with only myths of what came before. Modern science often dismisses these cycles as symbolic, yet the geological record insists otherwise. Extinction events occur at intervals. Climate cycles repeat. Civilizations collapse in waves. Even the motion of our solar system through the galaxy may expose Earth to periodic comet showers or radiation bursts, triggering cycles of destruction and renewal. Perhaps the ancients knew what we are only beginning to rediscover, that history is not a line of progress, but a repeating dance between creation and catastrophe. If time is truly cyclical, then what we call progress is fragile. It can vanish in an instant, undone by forces beyond our control. And if civilizations before us have already fallen to these cycles, then we are not as secure as we imagine. Our cities, satellites, and archives may seem enduring, but they are as vulnerable to flood, fire, and collapse as any that came before. In 1,000 years, future generations may look back at us not as the pinnacle of progress, but as another forgotten age, remembered only through fragments, anomalies, and myth. The idea of cyclical time also reshapes how we see the future. Instead of assuming endless advancement, we must consider the possibility of collapse and renewal. The question is not whether civilization will fall, but when. And if the past is any guide, it will rise again, rebuilt by survivors who carry fragments of our knowledge forward. The tragedy is that most of what we know will be forgotten, just as we have forgotten the knowledge of those before us. The cycle will continue, and each age will believe itself unique, unaware of the ages that preceded it. What makes the notion of forgotten ages so haunting is that we may already be living among their remnants without realizing it. Ancient ruins buried beneath the sea, myths of golden ages, out-of-place artifacts, all may be the last traces of civilizations erased by the cycles of time. We dismiss them as anomalies because they do not fit our linear timeline, but perhaps that timeline itself is wrong. Perhaps the truth is that humanity has always lived within cycles, rising and falling like the tides, leaving behind only fragments to confuse those who come next. The ancients may have tried to warn us. Their myths of floods and fire, their calendars marking cycles, their insistence on the impermanence of ages, all may be messages left for future generations, urging us to remember what they learned the hard way. Yet we rarely listen. We prefer to believe we are the first, the only, destined for endless progress. In doing so, we risk repeating the same mistakes, walking the same path into collapse. Cyclical time is not just an alternative way of seeing history, it is a key to understanding why so much feels missing. If civilizations before us were erased by cycles of destruction, then the gaps, the myths, and the anomalies all make sense. We are not at the beginning of the story, we are somewhere in the middle, part of a loop that has played out countless times before, and unless we learn from the fragments left behind, we too will vanish into the silence of forgotten ages, remembered only as myth by those who come after. The story of forgotten ages, lost knowledge, and ancient cataclysms isn't just about the past, it is also about the future. If history is cyclical, as myths and evidence suggest, then we are not outside the pattern, we are inside it, hurtling toward our own chapter's end, even if we prefer to believe in an endless trajectory of progress. Humanity's achievements feel permanent. Skyscrapers that scrape the sky, satellites orbiting the Earth, data stored in vast digital networks. But the truth is sobering. All of it is fragile, temporary, and vulnerable to the same forces that erased civilizations before us. We stand at the pinnacle of our age, but every pinnacle in history has been followed by a fall. The question is not whether collapse is possible, but whether it is inevitable. Our technology has given us incredible power, but it has also created new risks. For the first time in history, humans hold the tools of their own destruction. Nuclear arsenals could end civilization in hours, leaving only ruins and radioactive scars. Artificial intelligence, if uncontrolled, could outpace human decision-making, destabilizing societies in unpredictable ways. Climate change, fueled by our own industrial excess, is already disrupting weather, raising sea levels, and threatening the very infrastructure that sustains billions. Pandemics remind us how fragile global systems are, capable of grinding economies and cultures to a halt in mere weeks. Each of these threats, alone, could shatter the fragile fabric of civilization. Together they form a perfect storm, our own self-created cycle of destruction. But nature too remains the ultimate arbiter. Earth has always been shaped by cataclysms beyond human control. A supervolcano eruption could plunge the planet into years of darkness, collapsing agriculture and starving populations. A comet or asteroid impact, like the one that ended the reign of the dinosaurs, could erase our cities as swiftly as they arose. Shifts in the Earth's magnetic field, solar flares or cosmic radiation bursts could wipe out technology, returning us overnight to a pre-industrial world. These are not hypotheticals. They have happened before, and they will happen again. Our civilization's survival depends not on avoiding the cycle, but on whether we can endure it. If we disappeared tomorrow, how long would our memory last? Within decades, skyscrapers would crumble. Within centuries, steel bridges would rust into dust. Within millennia, even concrete would erode into the earth. Our satellites would fall and burn. Our servers would be unreadable. Our books long decayed. The survivors would carry oral traditions, stories of a fallen golden age, of gods of light and fire, of machines that flew and screens that spoke. Within 1,000 years, those stories would become myths. Within 10,000, they would be unrecognizable legends. Future archaeologists would find fragments of plastic, scattered bones, and maybe a few monuments, our version of pyramids or stone circles, and wonder, just as we do now, whether an advanced civilization once walked this earth. We too would become whispers in the cycle, another forgotten age. The frightening truth is that we may already be approaching that point. Signs of strain ripple across our global systems. Economies are interdependent, meaning that collapse in one region spreads quickly to others. Ecosystems are stretched thin, biodiversity declining at alarming rates. Political divisions deepen, wars flare, and resources grow scarcer. We imagine ourselves immune to collapse because of our technology, yet history shows the opposite. The more complex a civilization, the more fragile it becomes. Rome fell not because it was primitive, but because it was advanced, too sprawling, too dependent on fragile systems, too vulnerable to disruption. Our world is Rome multiplied 1,000 times, a global empire connected by fiber optics and fuel, vulnerable to cracks anywhere in its network. When those cracks spread, collapse is not gradual, it is sudden. And if the cycle is real, then what follows collapse is renewal. Survivors will endure, carrying fragments of our knowledge into the next age. They will rebuild, reinvent, and rediscover, just as we have done countless times. But they will also forget. They will forget how to make microchips, how to fly planes, how to generate electricity. They will forget the internet, satellites, and skyscrapers. What remains will be stories of our time, myths of machines that flew, cities that glowed with light, and gods who ruled from the sky. They may dig up our ruins, marvel at our artifacts, and speculate about what kind of beings we were. They may debate whether we even existed at all. Just as we puzzle over Atlantis or Yonaguni, they will puzzle over us. And once again, the cycle will continue. What makes this realization unsettling is how it reframes our sense of destiny. We like to believe we are moving toward colonizing other planets, reaching the stars, transcending Earth's cycles. But perhaps we are trapped in a loop, rising high enough to imagine escape before being pulled back down by catastrophe. Perhaps the silence of the stars is not absence, but proof that others too have risen and fallen, unable to escape the cycles of destruction that govern civilization. If that is the case, then our future depends on whether we can learn from the past, not just our own recorded history, but the forgotten ages buried in myth and anomaly. The ancients may have tried to warn us. Their stories of floods, fire, golden ages, and cycles of destruction may not have been allegories, but messages, warnings encoded in myth, preserved through story, urging us to remember, yet we dismiss them as superstition, ignoring the possibility that they are history's last survivors speaking across time. If we fail to listen, we may repeat the same mistakes, convinced of our permanence until the cycle sweeps us away. But if we take them seriously, if we look at myths as memories and anomalies as clues, perhaps we can break the pattern. Perhaps we can become the first civilization to endure beyond the cycle. Still, the odds are against us. The cycle has claimed countless civilizations before, on scales both local and global, and time is patient. Whether in decades, centuries, or millennia, collapse will come, Unless we change course, humanity's future hangs not on technology alone, but on humility. The humility to recognize that we are fragile, temporary, and not immune to the forces that shaped and erased those who came before. If we ignore that, then our skyscrapers, satellites, and digital archives will be nothing more than ruins for future generations to wonder about. Fragments of a forgotten story written in silence. In the end, our future may not be linear progress into the stars, but participation in an eternal cycle. We are not the first to rise, and we will not be the last to fall. The only question is whether we leave behind more than whispers, whether we can preserve enough of our story to help the next age remember, so they are not condemned to repeat our amnesia. The cycle of forgotten ages is not destiny, it is a warning, and the choice is ours, to listen, to prepare, and perhaps to endure, or to ignore the echoes of the past and vanish into the same silence that swallowed those before us. The story we have traced, from myths of floods and fire to the ruins of forgotten civilizations, from cycles of destruction to the fragile reality of our present, brings us to a sobering yet empowering realization. Humanity is not the first, and it may not be the last. We walk upon layers of history built by countless generations who came before us. Some remembered faintly in myth, others erased completely by time. The fragments they left, anomalous ruins, cryptic legends, impossible artifacts, are not just curiosities, they are reminders. They whisper to us that progress is never permanent, that greatness can vanish in an instant, and that memory is fragile. If we fail to listen, we risk becoming just another chapter in the same repeating cycle of rise and fall. Yet within this recognition lies a choice. Cyclical time does not have to mean inevitable doom. It can mean awareness, preparation, and perhaps even the chance to break free. The ancients may not have had satellites or smartphones, but they had wisdom born of survival. They understood the impermanence of ages, the fragility of civilizations, and the need to preserve knowledge through story, myth, and monument. Their warnings endure across thousands of years, and they challenge us to ask, what will we leave behind? Will we leave ruins and silence, or will we leave a legacy that helps the next age remember, so they do not start again from nothing? Our modern world, for all its complexity, is more vulnerable than we like to admit. A flood could erase cities. A solar flare could erase the internet. A conflict could erase borders and economies. These are not distant possibilities, they are ever-present risks. To believe we are immune is to repeat the arrogance of every civilization before us. And yet, unlike those who came before, we stand at a threshold. For the first time, we have the tools to document, to preserve, and to warn on a global scale. If collapse came tomorrow, our stories could still be carried forward, not just in fragile books or spoken myths, but in ways designed to endure beyond our own cycle. The question is whether we will use that power or waste it in distraction until it is too late. The conclusion of this journey is not despair, but responsibility. To understand that we are fragile is not weakness, it is clarity. It forces us to value what we have now, to recognize the beauty of this fleeting moment in history when the lights still shine, when the networks still hum, and when we still believe in endless progress. It forces us to look at the ruins of the past and see ourselves reflected in them, not with fear, but with humility. And it forces us to ask, how do we want to be remembered? As another lost age, buried under myth, or as the first to finally break the cycle and endure? Perhaps the silence of the stars is not a mystery, but a warning that countless civilizations before us have risen, reached for the heavens, and vanished, leaving nothing but echoes. If that is true, then we are not alone in the cycle, but part of a universal rhythm. And yet, the very fact that we can wonder about it means we still have time. Time to prepare, time to remember, time to choose differently. The cycle may not be destiny, it may be a challenge, one humanity has failed again and again, but one we still have the chance to confront. So the next time you hear a myth of a flood, or a story of fire from the sky, or a legend of a golden age lost, remember, it may not just be a story, it may be history, encoded in memory, passed down across millennia to reach you, and it may be speaking not only of the past, but of the future. The cycle of forgotten ages is not meant to frighten, but to awaken, to remind us that everything we build rests on fragile ground, and that unless we listen to the warnings left for us, we too may vanish into silence. But if we choose to hear, if we choose to learn, then perhaps, just perhaps, we can become the exception. Perhaps we can endure. Perhaps the cycle can finally be broken.